Welcome to Party Like a Marketer, the podcast dedicated to cannabis marketing, public relations, and authentic storytelling. I'm your host, Lisa Buffo, the founder and CEO of the Cannabis Marketing Association. You can connect with me on Instagram at LeeBuff and Twitter at LeeBuff21. Send me a message. I'd love to hear from you. Today's conversation features Rick Bashkoff, the Senior Vice President at Lucid Green. Rick is an experienced startup executive who has worked in or invested in some of the most innovative sectors of media, entertainment, and technology. Rick brings the knowledge base to the cannabis industry as the head of our marketing platform, Lucid Connect. Okay, welcome everybody to today's episode of Party Like a Marketer, the podcast dedicated to cannabis marketing, authentic storytelling, and cannabis PR. Today's guest is Rick Bashkoff, the Senior Vice President of Strategy and General Manager of Consumer Platforms at Lucid Green. Rick, thank you so much for being here today. Could you tell our guests a little bit about who you are, your background, what brought you to cannabis, what brought you to Lucid Green, and a bit about Lucid Green and what the company does?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having us, Lisa. We appreciate it. So I've actually been in cannabis for about 3 years now. I started off about 6 years ago as just, a hobbyist and interested on the investing side. And so thought it was a great way to learn about the market and decide if it was something I was interested in. And long story short, about 6 months into that, I found myself waking up in the morning rushing to read cannabis information as opposed to my previous career, which was in media and technology. Mainly in the startup space. I actually started at one of the major record labels, Warner Music Group, running digital video, and then moved over to startup when I was in my late 20s and haven't stopped. That's really where I've spent most of my career. So I'm kind of a typical startup executive. I do a lot of different things, but my focus area has been mainly in business development, GMing business units, and mostly for the better part of my career been just super focused on technology. Just a pretty natural interest for me. I've always kind of been into it. And same with cannabis. And so I've been a cannabis user for quite some time, and never really thought that career would take me in this direction. But like I said, when I started looking at companies and learning more, I kind of showed up in 2016 and felt like I almost missed the party. I didn't really realized that there was already so much happening in the medical space, and was completely naive on the power of the plant and all of that. So it took a few years for me to kind of catch up on all that, but made the jump at the end of 2017 and spent some time at a VC firm, spent some time consulting, and ultimately got connected to Lucid Green through some of the investing circles that I was in, and just really was very impressed with the platform. So what Lucid Green does is we're a software platform that solves both supply chain challenges, as well as an entire consumer marketing platform for brands specifically to speak directly to consumers. And so I thought it was unique in that the technology touches all areas of the supply chain. So everything from producers, distributors, retailers, we add value all along the supply chain. And then ultimately the area that I've been focused on up until recently exclusively has been on the consumer marketing piece. And, I've spent most of my time at the intersection of media and tech. And so having the opportunity to work with cannabis brands every single day, just trying to help them figure out how to connect with their consumers was ultimately just, too sweet of a gig. And so when I got the opportunity to join, I definitely jumped at it. Look, how I got to cannabis is, like I said before, just the natural passion just kind of brought me here. I feel pretty fortunate to be working in a space that is so new, and the people that I've met in the space thus far have been great. So I'm happy to be in the space.
And where did you grow up and where do you live now? Tell us a little bit about where you're from.
So I'm from upstate New York, just outside of Saratoga. For those who don't know, it's big kind of summer destination, horse track, all types of cool things for kids. But I was definitely an upstate New York kid. Went to school in Maryland. Took my first job in Miami and then moved to New York City. And I've been in New York City and the surrounding area since. So my wife and two kids, we live outside of New York, just in a town about 20 minutes north of the city. And we also own a vacation house in the Catskills in Woodstock, which is, from a culture perspective for the business that I'm in now is pretty sweet. And there's lots of cool things happening now that New York is working towards legalization. And so yeah, we're definitely New Yorkers. I don't think like your typical, what you think of like a city, New York, group, because we're pretty into nature but yeah, New York is home for us.
Where in Maryland did you go to school?
University of in College
That's
Park.
where I went.
What?
I went to College Park.
Terps.
Yep. Yeah.
When did you graduate?
2012.
Nice. I graduated in I was the class of 04.
Okay.
Yeah, very cool. I didn't realize that.
Well, yeah, I know. Same. I was like, Maryland. Now I gotta ask. We'll have to go down that rabbit hole another day. But there's a lot of Terps in the industry.
Yeah, I know. It's great.
That's awesome. And a lot of my Terp friends are New Yorkers. So
they actually have they have a master's program, I believe now.
They
or
do.
some type of program, in cannabis. So I was pretty pumped to see the alma mater getting involved. It's awesome.
Yeah, and I think it's a sign of the times that seeing it at higher ed institutions and start to take a hold as far as entering the mainstream. I mean, that's definitely one of the signals. So, well, that's exciting. I'm glad to hear that. Okay, well, Rick, tell us a little bit about, let's start with some advice you would share with cannabis marketers. As a startup guy in a startup industry, I'm sure you're enjoying the space. I share that personality trait with you where I love the early stages of things. And I think part of what's exciting about the cannabis space is that it's a startup industry. So everyone, even kind of the veterans in cannabis, we're still operating from that startup perspective, regardless of how long you've been here. So what is some advice you have for cannabis marketers and cannabis entrepreneurs, given the stage that Lucid Green is at and some of the things that you've learned that have translated or not to this space?
Yeah, sure. I would say the first thing that pops to mind is know more about your customer than anyone else and be just like ruthless about getting that information in a value exchange type of way, right? Thinking about it in terms of what can I provide to the consumer for them to share me more information so that I create this nice cycle of getting information that tells me what my customers want, how their behaviors are changing, how their desires are changing over time, and allow that to be a very strong signal and input into the products we make and how we market them. And so, obviously data is a word that's thrown around quite a bit, but it really boils down to finding out information about your customers. That is the easiest way to think about data, right? Because data can be a little scary. So I would say that's the first thing that comes to mind, is that, what's table stakes in other industries about the types of information you have to know about your consumers. I think we've seen more so than any of us would have liked in the cannabis space, brands that are doing a partnership with a cultivator, wrapping a logo around product and targeting an age range, right? Like that's not really, how to approach this type of product, especially because there are so many different types of consumer profiles, use cases for the plant, and the dynamic nature of how the plant actually reacts with consumers. There's just so much open space to find pockets of opportunity. And so I would say that if you're a cannabis marketer and soliciting information directly from your consumers is not like a cornerstone of your marketing program, it really should be, and you should start thinking about it immediately. And thinking about it in terms of getting more information from your customers is also like a less scary way to think about, I got to build a whole data thing. No, like start small. What is one way that you can connect with your customers that you can collect feedback on the product, on the experience, how easy it was to purchase? Do you like the merch we're putting out? Whatever that signal is, start small, start getting some signal, and you'll probably end up finding your way to the next, step 2, step 3.
And do you have advice on the sort of the practicality of how to do that. And I'll say this in with some background. So the way we do it at CMA is I'm all about buyer personas. I love buyer personas. I like that exercise of going through, we actually have a deck internally of these are our buyer personas. It allows you to fill in these blanks, what are they saying? What are their identifiers? What makes them unique? How can your product solve the problems that they have in their business? And we update them over time. And we actually just this week updated our buyer persona deck based on assumptions we had made in 2020. And we did that, that was another iteration. So there's sort of the like visualizing it, getting it, and codifying it internally so that your team knows and has some shared language. But then there's also the step of like getting that into your CRM or your database so you can take action from it and say, hey, okay, this customer, should get this piece of marketing information. And so we're going to segment them this way. Do you have, thoughts or advice on kind of the best way to collect and make that data usable within teams so that, so that you can really just make the most of it? Like any advice on sort of that technical implementation and even I don't want to say ranking of value, but like what is important and how do you collect that, if that makes sense?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm a very big proponent, and obviously take this with a grain of salt because I work at a cannabis tech company. But I think cannabis brands need to focus on making the best products. Cannabis retailers need to focus on the buyer journey. I think in terms of building a database, building go-to providers that do this all day, right? Like I've definitely come across brands who are like, yeah, well, we kind of made this, cobbled together this system with these 3 tools and whatnot. And if it works, great. But if you're struggling with it, there's lots of folks in the space that are looking to help cannabis brands manage their data, right? Whether it's a traditional CDP, a database platform that you can use, which might be a little too complicated for most, or having it bundled with other services like we do at Lucid Green, where if you're working on the consumer marketing platform, your consumer database is built into that. And that data, it's yours, right? Make sure you're working with someone who, if you're working with a provider and you're soliciting it and you're collecting it, depending on, in terms of ownership, that definitely can get complicated just in terms of the actual user owns their own submissions. However, as long as you're collecting this information in a compliant way that you can use it however you'd like to, I would say go with a third party to try and help you make the most of the data that you're collecting so that you can organize it and present it for inclusion in internal materials such as decks, external materials that you're going out to so that you can kind of, use this in sales materials at retail. You can use this at sales material, for your case at, events and conventions. But yeah, I would say that, don't try and invent these types of systems yourself. I think the best advice is to either bring on someone who can do this full time internally. And it's not just collecting data, right? Like I think there's a data leader that can, be bundled under marketing or operations, depending on what type of cannabis operator you are. But yeah, solicit the expertise. Don't cobble this thing together. It's too important. So that's kind of the answer to the second question about like super important to have the process in place. And I think it's great that you guys have a internal process where you're reviewing these buyer personas, different customer segments, for cannabis brands. And the point that you made about updating them over time is one that gets lost all too often, right? Like we did this brand exercise 2 years ago. This is our target customer. I can almost guarantee you that customer is not the same. It's been 2 years, so needs have changed, especially in cannabis. Market conditions have changed. Price can become a pretty important buying signal when prices drop, right? And then as that evaporates, other things become important. And so, that data stream of, collecting the data on an ongoing basis and letting it inform updates to your strategy, I think is of paramount importance.
Definitely. And it was funny when we did it, we thought, oh, these are going to be totally outdated. We're basically going to have to scrap them and start over. And we didn't. And we had done better than we thought as far as like, oh, these assumptions, they need to be updated, but there was a lot of meat to them as far as being true in present time with our present customers, but needing to adjust it and tweak it. So
you still needed to collect data to validate that, right?
Yes,
You still needed
100%.
to collect data to validate that we're still on the right path. And that can be even more valuable than finding out that you have to change path, right? So yeah, it's great to hear that you're doing that.
Yeah, definitely. And just find the nuances where, okay, maybe we had grouped these customers as one group before, but looking at it closely, we can divide this in two in a way that makes more logical sense for the business.
Yep.
One thing I want to talk about that you said that I've actually never heard anyone say before, but I'm still sitting with it, that brands need to focus on their product and retailers need to focus on the customer journey, which is interesting and makes a lot of sense. And I often hear, speaking with brands and retailers where brands are trying to also focus on the customer journey, help the retailers and help build that relationship in order to bring folks in the door, because so much in this space, as far as license holders, you're doing B2B and B2C marketing, where you need to build those relationships with the brand or retailer, depending on who you are, and the customer, to make sure you're bringing folks in the door. And that when they come in the door, that they're buying and asking for your product, which is, a win-win. But it does come down to the product at the end of the day, and also, what the bud tender is recommending. So can you speak a little bit, and I know Lucid Green touches this too, the difference in the cannabis industry as far as B2B data collection and B2C data collection on your customers, and how to kind of navigate and explore that as far as your marketing strategy, because they are different, but they're definitely related depending on your business. And we'll just stick to talking to brands and retailers here. What is the difference in let's just unpack that a little bit as far as collecting that information and how it is important to your marketing. Or just unpack for me what you said about brands focusing on product and retailers on the customer, the buyer's journey, because there's a lot there.
Yeah. And I mean, look, I think that, that statement was meant to be brief and overly simplistic. There's definitely a role for brands to play in the customer journey, especially those brands who are focused on direct to consumer offerings, right? I mean, obviously there's a need there to focus on the shopper journey. But in terms of, if you were to put one thing at the top of the Christmas tree, right, for what they do, the star at the top of the Christmas tree for producers, for manufacturers, for brands, is the product that they're putting on the shelves and the message that they're communicating to their customers, right? And so retailers, they do one thing for the most part, right, and they sell product. Now, there's obviously at the corporate level, there are companies that are doing both. But if you're looking at the retailer from a data collection perspective, they need to be very focused on the shopper journey. Whereas a brand has to be focused on post-purchase intelligence that can feed back to product development and, obviously help with the retail partnership for customer journey. But to get to your question about kind of how, and I think what you're asking, correct me if I'm wrong, is kind of how does collecting B2C information differ from B2B and what value those bring?
Yeah, it's internally, like how do you kind of prioritize it? How do you wrap your head around it internally, and where, I don't want to say where's the most value, because they're different as far as what they do, but oftentimes you do have to do both and manage both.
Sure. And look, Lucid Green definitely appreciates this. We operate both a B2B business and we provide software for consumers to connect with brands. And so we do have to collect both types of data. We're a little unique in that we're the platform on the consumer side, and we're the platform on both sides, but specifically on the consumer side, we're really, we're light on branding, we're light on consumer messaging, because it's really all about brands connecting with their consumers. But we act as consumer marketing specialists for our brands. And so I can tell you, the tactics for collecting data, directly from your customers can take a variety of different forms. Number one, if you have your owned and operated properties, you're collecting first-party data, right? First-party data being data that you are recording that refers to the user activities on your owned and operated properties. And there's a lot to unpack there depending on what platforms you're using. So that's one really easy kind of set. I don't want to say set and forget, but like set and it takes care of itself. It doesn't really, like once you set up your analytics, once you set up your social channels, your website, things like this, that you have a system to collect that data. So you have a stream of data coming to you. Having a way to communicate directly with customers who are purchasing your product. So like short plug for Lucid ID, we integrate right in at the package level so that can actually communicate with a customer if they scan the QR code. Another great thing about having this type of integration on your packaging is this is your consumer education platform right here. Customer can scan and they're now presented with a very rich consumer experience about your product, which I think education is one of the best value exchanges for collecting information from consumers, right? I'm going to provide you all of this really rich information about the product that you're holding, get you confident about your cannabis experience, and in exchange, tell me how it went. What feelings did you have? How quickly did the onset happen? Was it easy to find my products, right? Having that conversation directly is kind of that next level zero party data, which is a big buzzword today, in that you're now soliciting a response directly from your customer in exchange for some type of value. So I think those two areas I think are the places to focus for most cannabis brands and retailers for that matter, is being able to collect the data for the activities that are happening on the marketing channels that you operate and the sales channels that you operate. So that data stream is coming in, but then pair that with real life information that you're collecting from your consumers directly. On the B2B marketing side, obviously a bit different. We tend to, focus, on one or two social channels for obvious reasons that we all know, and we struggle with at all times. For anyone who's listening, who's just kind of first in cannabis, social media channels are quite the bear for cannabis brands and retailers alike, and even cannabis associations, I'm sure. We've actually run into problems, and we technically don't touch the plant, so it's rough out there. But I think, look, like there's areas like LinkedIn where there seems to be a very, very strong community in the cannabis space. This industry is almost over conferenced on some level, but there's a few key kind of national conferences that I think it's important to be at to collect real world information and feedback. I think a lot of companies go to events and just feel like it's about being there and it's about, the socializing and forming relationships. That is an incredible opportunity to collect information. And we at Lucid Green, we kind of have built an internal system using Notion and a couple of other, internal documents where, if you're running at a meeting and you find out a really interesting tidbit, it goes into a specific area in our internal tools so that we can kind of collect that feedback real time. And so on the B2B side, you got to be a little bit more creative. There's not a lot of kind of set and forget type of things in terms of data collection. But yeah, I would say, getting out, speaking directly to your customers, even in a conference setting, if necessary. But I mean, we're just like we were saying, like we were talking about, Lisa, before we hopped on, we're having a blast right now, just meeting with our customers on an ongoing basis. The agendas are light intentionally. We have a lot of conversations about the industry. We have a lot of conversations about, the details of everyday operations. And data reveals itself in those conversations. And so I urge, people on the B2B side, if you're not spending, a decent percentage of your time interfacing with the customers who are using your products, you're probably falling behind.
Yeah, I would say that's fair. And I think relationships that personal relationship to some degree is more important on the B2B side, because you are speaking to a more, I don't want to say sophisticated like buyer persona, but there's a little more at stake there because it is a B2B relationship, and we are talking about two businesses. So it really
Absolutely.
does
I mean,
matter.
look, I think you're actually spot on that because, if you think about, forming business relationships, most of these relationships are not as fleeting as a purchase, right? And most business relationships, I'm not going to make a decision to join another cannabis association for marketing every day. It's going to happen once or twice a year for me, right? Where we take a look at who we want to, which associations and communities we're getting the most out of, right? And we're going to make a decision. Whereas, with consumers, a lot of cannabis consumers are making decisions every single week, right? And so the opportunity to affect that decision in that cycle is, so I think you're right on the B2B side. Relationship building is definitely of the highest importance.
And do you have any lessons from your Warner Brother days and your video media days that have been instrumental in the marketing that you do now?
Yeah, you know what? I would say one of the things that I learned in my previous life, in my career, is just don't bet the farm on one platform or one marketing channel. We saw a lot of folks in the media space do that so I'm in the YouTube media space like in 2006, 2007. And like video is going from a marketing cost in music, right? Music videos, right? To sell more music to an asset that you can stream on YouTube and make money off of. It was just like really big shift. And we just watched all of these content creators, right? Basically one year they were betting everything on YouTube. The next year it was going to be all about Facebook. And it was like, you just watched this like jumping from platform to platform. You got to diversify. You got to have your email list. You got to have the website. You got to have a bunch of different channels so that when one of them changes, or in the cases of cannabis and why it's relevant, when one of them goes down, because it's been blocked, you're not blocked off from communicating with your customers, right? And I personally think that if you get the cadence right, most consumers today actually appreciate getting communicated and educated in different ways, over a 6 to 12 month period, right? And so I think that that's one of the big lessons that has translated. Like we were preaching this constantly in the media space, like, diversify, like have more marketing channels in the video space where your content is living, and not a million, but have more than one that is core to your strategy. And I think how that's translated over to cannabis brands is sometimes we'll meet with a cannabis brand and, what are you spending marketing on? And we're doing everything is retail co-branding with, or co-marketing with our retailers. That's like all we spend money on. And look, like I get how, with current marketing conditions, it can be very easy to make the easy decision. But you're not setting yourself up for when that retailer changes policies or you fall out of favor at that retailer. Now what is you got to kind of rethink on the fly over and over and over again. Whereas if you're setting this up where I have channels like email and my website and other places where I have a direct communication with my customers, right? That's a lot of the reason why brands approach Lucid Green for the Lucid Connect consumer marketing platform, is for them to be able, well, this is another thing for me to turn on where I'm communicating directly with my customers. And it just, again, like social goes down, they know that they have other channels to communicate to their partners. So diversify, get a nice group of partners that can work with you, that work friendly together. Tech platforms are meant to integrate. That's why APIs exist. And so, make sure that you've got a group of partners that are setting you up for success.
That's fair. And one thing we've also learned from marketing on the CMA side is not only do you want to diversify for, basic survival purposes, but people also consume information differently. Some people are video aficionados and that's how they learn. That's what they love. Other people prefer to read. and they like articles and they like lists. So having different forms of content on different channels can reach different people who it might not be that they're not aware that you're on YouTube, but that's just not how they like to consume information. So you're also kind of meeting their learning styles as you were talking about education and how important it is in cannabis. That is couldn't be more true. So having
you actually, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you actually brought up something that I think is relevant here, which is if you're taking the mindset that you just described, it sets you up to be able to test different things, test different things, right? I don't see enough of that in cannabis. That's like all we did with our partners back at, when I was in media and video. It's like, hey, let's try this. Oh, this part worked, but this didn't. Let's do it again. Let's keep doing, So I'm constantly talking to brands when they say, yeah, have you tried XYZ? Yeah, we tried that once. It didn't work. We don't do that anymore. It's like, well, let's talk a little bit about that. Why didn't it work? Right. And so I think that there has been a lot of, and I feel for cannabis brands on this point, right? It's like you get burned on a marketing spend, it stings. But if you can kind of change your mindset a bit in that every new thing, every new tactic that you try in your marketing strategy, it's a test, right? We're testing this thing. If it didn't work, we need to figure out why it doesn't, and tweak it, or try and get creative on different ways to approach it. So you just made me think of that, because I think that's a smart way to approach, because if you're trying something, you may hit on something that's really working on email that can benefit your business in ways that you didn't really know. So just keep trying, keep testing.
No, I love that. That's totally the iterative startup mind of just constantly creating and busting assumptions and just rinse and repeat until your business is working. But the other thing I wanted to mention is I really love and am a fan of HubSpot talks about this. Gary Vee talks about this, but this like content model where you have sort of pillar content or pillar information you're talking about it, but you can disseminate it into different forms. So if you are creating a webinar, that's an hour long, you can make a 1-minute video clip, you can make a blog post from it, you can make 4 or 5 social media posts that are optimized for different platforms. So you're putting in one effort for creating this one piece of content, but it can be kind of sliced and diced and disseminated in different platforms. So you can test, video, you can test short form, you can test long form, you can test written from one piece of content. So you're making those tests kind of go further, faster, but keeping that constant the same of, okay, this piece of content is talking about, whatever it is, that topic. So there is ways to use this startup mindset and use this concept of, how do I make what I have go as far as possible and learn as much as possible simply by sort of changing your formats and how content is presented, whether that's education or marketing.
I think all of what you just said also applies to data collection, right? You're taking in data, and that one piece of data that you're taking in, if you pair that with other data, right? So if you take, for example, if you take consumer scan data and you take time of day data, right, and you pull these things together, you can start to see, okay, there's certain types of day that consumers seem to be in the mindset of scanning product and finding out more about product. So that's going to inform when I send out my emails, when I send out push notifications to people in my loyalty program, because I know these are the types of days that it seems like people are either at the dispensary, they're getting home with their product and checking out the packaging. But I think that mindset of collecting, or in the case of content, creating once, right, but then being able to, or I guess the better way is generating once, right? Generating content once, but then slicing and dicing it into different different pieces of content or different linkages of data. You start to really get, multiples on the value of your effort. So I think it's a really smart way to think about content.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, from the data perspective, it makes sense. And I meant to ask you, so when you scan that package you held up and you have your QR code, what happens? Like what do they see? What comes up? What's next?
Yeah, it's great. So brands have the ability to basically present a mobile optimized product brochure. So everything from product imagery to description of the product, the full source to shelf story, um, dosages, likely effects. We curate a set of product reviews so that folks can see what they're getting into. And then finally, most importantly, and where I think we believe as a company, there's so much opportunity is we're actually integrated with over 400 testing labs. So we actually have the certificate of analysis data, so the product testing data in a user readable format. If the users want to, they can click through and see the actual official COA data, but that builds trust with the customer, right? So like that area of the experience automates being able to communicate trust to your customer. Here's the testing data. Like this is a legit product. We follow the rules. This is above board. Here are the types of cannabinoids, how much THC is in it, getting into terpene profiling, which we're very excited about. I don't think the consumers are there just yet, but I think we see a future of true effects-based products that are based off of specific terpene profiles. So you just have this opportunity as a brand to close the knowledge gap with your customers about your product, which is, again, just to bring this full circle, I think that's the tip of the spear for data collection and value exchange is let me give you more information, give you, a bit more confidence about our product and our brand. And in exchange, we'd love to hear about your experience or what your intentions are or what your preferences are, right? And so, I think that is, one of the most exciting parts of the Lucid Green platform is all of the work that we do on the supply chain side of our business fuels this very rich consumer experience. And so when you sign on with Lucid ID for your packages, you're really signing on for both operational efficiencies and solving the consumer marketing conundrum all in one fell swoop. And it's really powerful. Consumer scans the code, they get, they're getting direct communication from you. And like I said, it builds trust, being a transparent brand and kind of shouting it from the mountaintops. It matters for consumers, especially at this point in the industry.
Yeah, definitely. So it's a trust signal because they know they're going to see the testing results, and it's almost extended packaging space in the sense where you can put all the information in that won't fit on the box.
Yeah, and like really immersive experiences, and brands can, I know brands are starting to, and I saw you did a podcast on this recently, getting into the NFT space. There's basically there's the ability to deliver whatever type of experience you want in terms of, you can obviously link off to other places that you're building community. You can ask them to join your email. There's all types of ways to communicate. And it's really like we're actually, the consumer application is the Lucid ID app. It's available in the Apple and Google Play Store, and really it's a brand space to connect with customers. And so you don't have to have the app to scan this product and get the consumer information. That's all built in. But if you want to connect further with a brand, you have the opportunity to join their loyalty program, get value from them, share information back, and really form a strong relationship.
And you were saying from the brand side, they get to sort of own that data. So do they get to see, when QR codes were scanned and like tell me a bit about that. Do they get to see, hey, Lisa, the 32-year-old female in Denver just bought she scanned this on your edible package? Like what? Sure. Yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah. So look, yes, like we are like borderline annoying with our customers, getting nudging them to get them to look at the dashboard. So we have a dashboard product called Lucid Insights. Lucid Insights for brands is what's included as part of the platform. What basically happens is we visualize the core health metrics for our customers. So we look at things like scan rate. So over a 6-month period, how many products did you put into market? And of those, how many were scanned by a customer, right? And to give you an idea, on our platform, the platform average is around 3.5 to 4%. When you think about other marketing channels, it's actually a pretty good response rate,
Yeah.
right? For those brands who lean in and have a loyalty program and start to message their customers, best brand on the platform has an 11% scan rate. It's bonkers, right? So
Wow.
better than 1 out of every 10 purchases, people are engaging with you and giving you information. It's pretty impressive. We also look at things like engagement rate. How often are the loyalty members that join your program, how often are they coming back and engaging? How often are they scanning? How often are they claiming points from you, right? Another important thing that we give them the opportunity to look at is, where is all this activity happening? Both from a location, time, device. We give them lists of their top users so that they can connect directly with them. Some of the brands on our platform are starting to do really cool stuff around experiences. So if we're going to do like a purpose-led brand, for example, we're going to do a beach cleanup. If you come to the beach cleanup, we'll have couple QR codes there that you can scan. You can get 50 points and join our loyalty program. There's all kinds of different ways that you can start. And this is, to go back to our initial conversation, data collection. This is all data collection, right? But it's data collection that fosters a really strong relationship. And so every piece of data that we're collecting, we're turning into some type of visualization for our customers. But I will say, like, I'm not really into the whole like dashboard set and forget thing. Like, that's the tip of the iceberg. So like for us, we use the dashboards with our customers to ask the initial question, but then we provide a tremendous amount of support to our customers in terms of running, bespoke data queries, doing bespoke analysis. So we'll ask a question and pick up on something from the dashboards, but the real insights come from the support that we give our customers. And imagine being a cannabis brand and you have a data analyst on your team. It just so happens it's with a partner, but you have the ability to kind of tap into that knowledge base and say, well, we've noticed X. I'll give you an example. So we have a brand that has loyalty programs in a few different states, and one of the states, California, is always the top scan just because of the scale, right? The top scanning state. One day last week, Oklahoma came out of nowhere and was the top scanning brand on their platform. So what happened there? So we're able to go look at, where did the scans happen, what users were scanning. And so we were able to figure out very quickly that new store opened in specific area. And this user base, they leaned forward, and in some of the in-store events, the brand ambassadors did a really good job of pointing out the code and whatnot. And so it's great to be able to, catch a trend at the dashboard, but then work with the brand to get to the bottom of it, because that's where the learnings and the insight takes place.
That makes sense. And it definitely helps, I think, when you have that level of expertise to dive into it and make sense of it. Because I think one of the problems we see with brands and retailers is they do have a lot of data, but they don't know what the actionable next step is.
Absolutely. And I would say, look, like, we want to work with other data providers in your stack, right? Because we're one signal, right? We're really focused on post-purchase information. But if you're working with, a media activation company, you're running campaigns and you're getting data from that, let's work together. Let's figure out a way to work with your other partner so that we can figure out if, a specific message that you were pushing on the paid media side really activated your loyal customers. We should know that, right? And so it's important to, again, I kind of beat this drum a lot, work with partners that are willing to work together. It's really important.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. I think definitely with data, it takes a village to make sense of it.
Absolutely.
Okay, Rick, well, I want to be mindful of the time. So one last question. What would, like, if you had one piece of advice for brands in the cannabis space or entrepreneurs, like what would it be?
Right now, next year is going to be tough. I think it's going to be, we're kind of meeting this point of maturation in the business, which I think is exciting and a little scary. But my one piece of advice is to, don't forget the size of the opportunity that we're all working on here in terms of leveling the playing field, an industry that can level the playing field, right wrongs, generate a tremendous amount of opportunity, jobs, and yes, money, right? Like there's lots of opportunity here, but don't lose sight of that during tough times. If you're entering the cannabis space right now, come in with your ready to do battle. I mean, it is a tough space to operate, but it's rewarding. So my piece of advice is to keep your head up out there and keep solving problems. If you're solving problems, you're probably headed in the right direction. If you're stuck, find partners that can help you. But yeah, it's tough out there right now, but I really think that the 5-year outlook here is really, really exciting. Just unfortunately, we're in a space right now where it happens to most markets, and it's kind of a badge of honor to kind of hit these market corrections. But if you're staying focused on the basics and just having grit, you're going to get on the other side, and there's going to be lots of fun to be had on the other side.
Yes, very much so. Well, Rick, is there any contact information, website, social handles, anything you want to share for listeners who are either trying to find Lucid Green or you?
Yeah, check us out at lucidgreen.io. You can find out all about what we do there, and schedule a demo. It's the first place you should start with any tech provider is let them show you what they do, and we can't wait to connect with brands and show them exactly what our tech does. So head on over to lucidgreen.io or lucidgreen.io/demo and hit us up, and we'll get back to you within 24 hours.
Awesome. Well, Rick, thank you so much for taking the time to connect with us today. We will link on our podcast page, your website, Lucid Green's website, and your LinkedIn. Thank you. It was really been a pleasure talking data with you and learning more about you as well.
Same. Thanks, Lisa. Talk to you soon.
Okay. Thanks, Rick.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Party Like a Marketer. Follow us on Instagram at Party Like a Marketer and on our website, thecannabismarketingassociation.com. Check out our website for more details and membership information. We'll see you next time.